Sweet. Okay. So thank you all for coming. I super appreciate it. I know you're all super busy. And so this is my talk. It's by Silicon Roundabout. So thank you for having me. And it's going to be about how to 10x your startup social media growth. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Can you hear me at that?
Yeah.
Sweet. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming. My name is James. I'm currently the creative director of an organisation called YSYS, which basically is working to improve the tech scene for people from diverse or underrepresented backgrounds, and to make it more available and help people who are building companies get access to funding and things like that. I'm also a freelance designer and working on some other bits and pieces. So that's my Twitter. You can follow me if you really want to. So this has been like most of my career so far. I'll give you a quick background about me before we jump into it. So I started working in the NHS. I was like an engineer, and I was doing design on the side. I'd always been like super interested in art and design, and working on things like that. This was right around the time when the App Store was actually like getting super popular, and people were actually starting to develop apps and things, but still not really considering how they looked. It's more about actually getting something out there. And so I was working in the NHS as an engineer, and I was spending a lot of time with doctors and nurses, some of them who were like a bit older than me, but a lot of them also were like in their 40s or 50s and things like this. And so they were using stuff that wasn't like Snapchat or things like this, but they were using like apps and tools that were basically imperative to actually helping people and keeping these people alive. And so it felt stupid to me that these things were designed so badly. And if I was using them and I could barely use them as like a tech-savvy person, then how were these like nurses and doctors who were in their 40s and 50s expected to use them when it was going to impact on someone's life? And so I tried to redesign some of them, and they said no. So I was like, okay. So I left and I went to go to university. That's what the second logo is. And I studied design and design and business at the University of Gloucestershire. And so I was there for 4 years, and while I was there, I ended up working for Yik Yak, if anyone remembers Yik Yak. But it was basically an anonymous social network app for universities and college campuses. It was like huge in the US, and it touched basically every university or high school. And then they branched out over here, which is what I was doing. So I was doing initially brand ambassador work, and then later it was like international brand marketing, and I was working closely with their design team because my course was related. And that was really like my first kind of like time touching like startups and tech companies as well, really. And I thought it was super interesting. I really liked the speed that things were moving at. I really liked the fact that you could just like work on stuff and it was actually making people happy or helping people have fun rather than just like a lot of the other jobs I saw my friends doing and that I'd previously done for like the engineering job. Yik Yak was like a bit like a weird case, and the reason you might not have heard of it now is because they basically raised loads of money, got huge. They were raised at $75 million, they were valued at $400 million, and then like a year later they were basically nothing, and they sold to Square, the payments company, for like $1 million, which is still pretty good, but so not 400. So then I ended up working for this company in the middle, Incuna, which is a digital healthcare agency, where I was one of their lead designers working for pharmaceutical companies, health services and places like that, to build apps and websites. I saw that company start off from around like 10 or 15 people, and then by the time I left it was at like 50 or 60, something like that. Next one, this one right here, is a company called Labstep, who's a scientific tech startup building like a community for what is essentially GitHub for scientists. And then that brings us to these like two final ones where, so this one, Campus London, is just around the corner if anyone knows it. It's a building that Google has for supporting startups. They actually rebranded yesterday to Google for Startups. And so I've been one of their community ambassadors for the last kind of year and a half. And then most recently, like I mentioned, I joined YSYS as their creative director. So that's like a little kind of like short background in what I've been doing, with various other bits and pieces in there as well. So throughout like most of my career, while I've been like mostly design focused, I've actually really enjoyed exploring things like community and community growth, and then marketing and social media as well. And I think all of these are very like interlocked, and they can all be used to benefit each other rather than just focusing on one. So I try to do like all of them. And so this is kind of like where I position myself in the middle. So let's get like started. Cool. So I've got like a few topics to speak about here. I condensed it down. I had like a long list I sent to Paul, and I cut it down into like a few ones. And all these slides are going to be available. I'll send them all to you guys as well. So don't feel like you've got to take pictures if you really want to, but you totally can if you want to. So I'm going to start with rapid fire content creation. And so with all the experience I've had with like working on my own projects or working for companies, and also seeing other companies and seeing my friends who are entrepreneurs like building their companies, the most difficult part to me about social media for a startup is just being consistent with it and just putting stuff out repeatedly. Unless you've got like a team or even just like 1 or 2 people that you can spare to do this stuff regularly, it really like it cuts into the amount of time that you can spend on other things. And when you're like first starting a company, maybe you actually can't afford to have that person. So maybe you're doing it yourself, but that takes time away from the product and other bits and pieces. But everyone knows that it's super valuable to have an audience and to have this attention, whether you use it now or if you use it later. So to me, the most important element is consistency. And so consistency does a few things for your brand. It helps you to build awareness. It helps you build familiarity with your audience and your customers. And it also helps build trust. And a lot of these things aren't done overnight. They have to be done from months or even longer. And so the earlier that you can get started with this stuff will really make a difference. And these aren't things that all of these things act as like a snowball effect, and the earlier you start doing them, the bigger the impact they're going to have later. And so it does like pay off to put the effort in ahead of time. And so I was thinking about this, and I've worked on a few companies where we've had this problem about like whose job it is to do it, and can we actually like spare the time? And normally it got like thrown on my plate just because I was the one who was using lots of social media, and I was always on it. So they were like, "Okay, just get James to do it." But if there's ways that we can actually cut out the hard parts of being consistent with social media, then it will make it a lot easier and a lot more accessible for the whole company as well. And so some of the ways of doing that are by actually making use of the people in the team and not having just one person do it, but if we can utilise different people and their different skills and their different interests, it can actually save you loads of time. Time being the last part here. And so if you can save time while doing it, generate loads more ideas and get more people involved, then it's kind of, it's almost like a no-brainer not to do it. Unfortunately, there's actually like exercises that you can do to work on this. So this is one, I actually don't know who posted it. I saw it on LinkedIn originally, and I immediately lost it. Unfortunately, I managed to like recreate it mostly from memory. But so if anyone recognises this, please let me know who it is. But basically, the exercise is that you can bring as many people as you can. You can do this by yourself, and this is partly what the sheet is for. But if you can bring as many people in to do it together as possible, then it's even better. It's like it's awesome to do it that way. And so you want to bring all your people together. It can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour or more. You can literally get this stuff done super quick if there's more of you. And you want to write down your startup's niche, so something that you guys are probably super well familiar with, seeing as you've started the company, you should know that very well. And then you want to write down just 15 keywords related to that niche, and we'll go through this in a second, so I'll show you what I mean by that. But once you've got your 15 keywords, you then want to take one of those keywords and think of 15 topics that you can write about for that thing. I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's go through all together. So if you imagine that you have a business that is focused on video, I'm actually building an app which is related to watching video, so that's why I use this example. And if you are going to think of 15 keywords that you can use for that, so I've written 15 down here. So you've got IGTV, which is Instagram's new TV app. You've got YouTube. Colour, maybe that's like colour grading, things like that. Photography, cinema, sound, filmmaking, all these different things which are aspects of that thing, but maybe not the number one core element that you're basically like working on. So let's choose one. So I chose career. Career is actually always quite a good one to do because I'll come to that in a second, but it always gives you some good options. And so if I jump onto the next page, these are like 15 topics that I came up with. This is like 11, I think. But so if I was going to go with career, then you can start looking at things like maybe if you're a student, how you can get a job in that industry, or best websites to go to, or good film festivals, or how to contact people. Networking is probably something that comes super familiar to us, but for people in different industries, maybe it's actually not that familiar. And so if you can actually, say I was working at LabStep and we wanted to interact with a lot of scientists. Hey, you got a question?
Just can't hear you there.
Sorry, I'll try to speak out. My voice got quiet. So we were trying to basically contact scientists and interact with them. But a lot of the problems that scientists were having was finding companies to do their PhDs with, or finding companies to go in after they've done their PhDs. And so if we can actually say these are the good websites to go to, or these are the good people to contact, or even just this is how to contact people, while it seems obvious to us working in like the tech industry, in a lot of other industries, those systems aren't developed that well. We've got LinkedIn, which is obviously all over the place, but people maybe don't really know about it for using film. Film has like IMDb and things like this as well. Right, so basically what you do, once you've got those 15 topics that I mentioned, these ones here, you can start generating a lot of content from one or two main pieces of content. And so if we say that one of those topics then becomes an article, you can publish that article on your blog, on Medium, LinkedIn, and immediately that's given you more than 60 pieces of content there. And so if you were just going to do those as well, that is probably enough to keep one company going for like a decent amount of time. And that's a lot more than most companies do. Most companies are doing a lot less than even 60 per year, I guess. But then each of those articles can then be repurposed into other things. So you can then turn that into a slideshow, and you can publish it on places like SlideShare. But you can also turn it into a lead magnet. I don't know if anyone knows what a lead magnet is, but basically it's a tool that marketers use to do things like capturing email addresses for audiences. And so the best way to describe it, or a perfect example, is if you were going to create like a really short checklist of things to be done, maybe like 8 to 12 points. It's really like short, actionable steps that people can go through to make an impact in whatever it is that you're talking about. So, for example, if this is social media, I've got a sheet here which has got a checklist of like 10 steps to go to when you are about to publish it. And so what you do is you post that on social media or on your website, and you say like, in return for your email address, you get this really high value piece of content, which is really quick, it's really actionable stuff. It takes people no time to get familiar with, and it immediately starts making a difference to them. That's a really good way of like building up an email list and then putting that towards your audience. And then, like I've got the end here, you've got PDFs which you can just like publish it everywhere. Like for example, these slides can be a PDF. Each one of those topics can also become a long and short video. I think video is really like the best way to go, because especially if you're doing it kind of like off script, you can get a lot of like extra bits of information that just get thrown in when people think of different stuff. And so one long video, so I had to like shorten these words to fit them in, but so one long or short video can then be posted on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then IGTV as well. And so it's actually, while you're creating maybe like one or two pieces of core content that takes the majority of the time, a lot of it is just repurposing stuff, and the repurposing actually doesn't take anywhere near as much time as the initial kind of like time investment. And so each video's audio track can then become a podcast, and then podcasts can be posted on SoundCloud or Spotify or Apple Podcasts as well, various other places. And it's just like, it's basically allowing you to create a few pieces of content, and then really maximize the amount of people who see it with not much extra work. Each one of the original bullet points that people talk about in the podcast can then become a post on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. Each post on there can become a tweet or a series of tweets in a Twitter thread. Twitter threads are pretty new at the moment, and they're still something that people actually, it might be the first time they're seeing them if you post it on your feed. And doing like a series of tweets, now that they're actually linked together, gives you a really good opportunity to actually explain things more in depth, be more descriptive about what you're talking about, and start including different links to other places or more content like GIFs or photos, things like that. Each one of those tweets can also become an Instagram quote, and each Instagram quote can then be reformatted to Pinterest as well. People don't normally like pay that much attention to Pinterest, but being like a very like visual or like primarily visual feed, it's got a lot of like the good aspects of Instagram, but potentially hitting your customers or people who view it when they're in a different frame of mind or a different kind of like space. I'll come to that in a second. So that's most of what it is, and that's what the sheet I gave you is all about, is how to generate those ideas and those topics initially and those keywords, which you can then turn into this stuff. And all of this stuff is in the other sheets, which I'll send you guys afterwards as well. And so by doing all of those things, that gives you immediately over 1,800 pieces of content, which is way more than you need for a year. That's that's years worth straight away. And that could all come from literally 15 topics, just like cut and reformatted for different platforms, which is a huge number. It's like I mentioned before, like 60 pieces of content is more than most companies do. So having 1,800 pieces is basically unheard of. And so that brings me to the next section, which is basically context-based attention. And so the idea behind this is that should you focus all your attention onto a single platform or a single place with one audience, or should you try and spread yourself thin? And I think by doing some of the methods that I already mentioned, you actually don't really need to spread yourself thin, because a lot of the work behind generating the content is already done. So I think actually opening yourself to as many audiences as you can, even if you only get a few views on Pinterest or you only get a few listens of your podcast, there's still people that are being more familiar. And the more content that you put out, if you're doing this stuff regularly, then it really, really does build. And so as I said here, people use different social networks for different things. And those could be things like, it might be actual feelings, or it might be different states of mind, or it might be even just the fact that people go on YouTube to watch video and they go on Twitter to read. But like I mentioned, things is actually interchangeable with feelings, and so that's a really good way to think about using different social networks and how you should act on them, and how you should talk on them as well, and how you should actually get stuff in front of people. And I'll show you different ways of doing that. So here's just a few social networks. These are like the main ones, and I'm going to explain some stuff about these. So normally, if I talk to someone and I say, out of Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook, which ones would you put together? Quite often people say Instagram and Snapchat, because they are both portrait-based apps. They're very, very visual. You're interacting with your friends and things like that. And then obviously there's the similarities between Snapchat stories and Instagram stories. But I would actually go the other way, and I would actually pair Instagram more with Twitter and Snapchat more with Facebook. And the reason is the audiences and the frame of mind. So when people are going onto Instagram, and this is obviously like a generalization, this isn't specific for everyone, but quite often people's Instagram feeds are public, or when you go onto Instagram, you can actually go and follow anyone. I could search for any of you in this room and go and follow you. Your account might be private, but I can still go out there and search for people. And people generally have a much wider network. They're following celebrities, they're following brands and stuff as well on here. Whereas on Snapchat, for example, it's a lot more intimate, and it's quite often just your very, very closest friends, maybe a couple of celebrities on there. But the group that you're actually interacting with is often far smaller than it is on Instagram. And then that's the same with Twitter and Facebook. So on Facebook, it's normally just your friends and family, maybe some co-workers. And then on Twitter, it's almost the opposite. It's a much more public forum where you can go and search for people, and you can follow people whether you know them or not. And so there's different ways of thinking about what people use these platforms for. So like I mentioned here as well, Instagram is much more stylized, filtered, and edited, whereas Snapchat is actually more raw, fun, and random, and kind of in the moment. So it's definitely worth considering how you speak to people, or how your brand or your company gets in front of people, depending which social network it is. And then that lets you think about different ways of voicing your messages, different ways of sharing it, or even if you even need to or not. And I'll explain that as well. So as I put down here at the bottom as well, Instagram is a very aspirational feed, which I'll explain, but it's very different to, although the platforms look very, very similar, and they work similar as well, people using Instagram and Snapchat in a different frame of mind. When people go to Snapchat, they want to have fun and see what their friends are doing, they're reading all the stories, they're putting filters on. So if you go on there and you start trying to hard sell your product or your service, they're probably not in the right frame of mind to be dealing with that. And that goes the same for things like LinkedIn. When people go onto LinkedIn, generally they are in the frame of mind where they want to think about work. And so again, rather than actually selling your product, maybe you want to do stuff about your company, and it's how your company did this X to complete Y, or maybe it was something about your company culture, why it's so good to work there. And because when people go on LinkedIn, they're not thinking about what product am I going to buy, whereas maybe they are on Instagram or Facebook, where they expect it now. I'll come to this in a second as well. but so this is what I was talking about. So if you go on LinkedIn, maybe you want to post a blog post, which is how your company did X to improve Y, or showing off your culture, Y to work there. But then on Instagram, maybe you actually want to show your product or service in a really nicely shot setting that's professionally done, and actually showing off that aspirational feeling that I mentioned, where people want to look at stuff that's nice and like it's aesthetic on Instagram, and that's almost like their purpose for going there, whereas going to other platforms. Maybe on Instagram stories, you want to show behind the scenes of your company's day-to-day life, interacting with the audience and feedback. And some companies that do utilize Snapchat do this thing, and they do kind of like behind the scenes of their company on Snapchat. But then, like I mentioned, they're almost reaching their fans or their audience in a time when they're there to have fun, and they're not thinking about this kind of stuff. And then Twitter, maybe you can do company updates or support interacting with your audience, because it's a perfect platform for that. And Twitter and Instagram have now put in these kind of like native effects where you can do Twitter threads, or you can add buttons to your tweets to let people immediately DM you just with like one tap. Or then on Instagram, you've got polls and things like that, which just makes it easier for you to do. Right. Cool. So Wendy's is like an example that I'm going to go through. Does everyone know what Wendy's is? Anyone been to Wendy's before? No? It's like, yeah, there you go. It's so Wendy's, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like a burger chain. It's just like Burger King or something like this. I think it's only based in the US, maybe it's other places, I don't know. I've been to it once and it was fine. It was fine. But Wendy's, for some reason, are absolutely killing it on social networks. Twitter especially, there's like a really weird kind of like phenomenon at the moment where food brands are just smashing it on Twitter especially, and they really have no reason to, but they clearly put a lot of work into this and got the right people to work on it as well. Wendy's is one. There's another one called Moon Pie. I don't know if anyone knows what Moon Pie is. It's like some kind of like chocolate marshmallow thing, and that's literally all it is. But for some reason, their Twitter account's got like millions of followers, and they get 35,000 retweets on one tweet they do, and they really have no reason to. It's just a chocolate marshmallow thing. So actually, if you are putting the time in and like actually working out who your audience is and how to interact with them, you can get the craziest like results from it. So there's also a really amazing article about Wendy's social media, which I linked here at the bottom as well. It'll be I'll send you guys an email with this. But so one of the things that Wendy's do that is really, really good is that they retweet and respond to so many people, even stuff that's like abusive. So if they get someone who says like, my burger sucked, then Wendy's will abuse them back, which seems like the stupidest thing to do. But other people see it and they can relate to that and they think that's funny, and other people will share it. And even though it's not what you would normally expect to do, why would a brand almost harass their customers? It makes no sense. But because they know exactly who their audience is and they relate to them so well, and that's something that these kids are seeing with rappers, for example, arguing with each other. They actually tapped into that and saw that actually calling people out is funny, and other people really like it as well. And so that's a good example of user-generated content. It's actually like making use for your own gain of stuff that your users or your fans or your audience are doing. And so another example that they do really well is they do a lot of polls and threads. They use the polling feature like super often, weekly if not daily, which is a really good use of native features in the app. And that's a really good way of just making your content more interactive. When people go onto your social media, they don't want to just read all the company updates. They want to actually be able to look at what you're doing and seeing that actually there's real people behind your company as well. Let me move on. So posting memes, for example. Memes are something that, depending on your audience, might be super, super relevant, especially if you're looking at like young millennials or like Gen Z people. If you can actually capitalize on memes, then it could really, really drastically change the way that your social media works. Obviously, it's not relevant for everyone, and so if you went out and you had, I don't know, the Financial Times maybe wouldn't do it. It wouldn't make sense based on their audience. But then for Wendy's, they know that despite everyone probably in the US being aware of Wendy's, and Wendy's is open to everyone as well. It's not an age limit. You don't have to be under 25 to go to Wendy's. Like people in their 60s can go to Wendy's, but they know that of the people who are following them on Twitter, probably, I don't know, just pick a number, maybe 70% are under the age of 23. Actually, they know that even though they might be excluding 30% of their audience, by really going deep on the stuff that the 70% want, it just builds a much stronger bond with them as well. And so again, that's a good example of them being relatable to their audience. Then, like I mentioned here, they've got a whole selection of tweets, photos, GIFs, videos, polls, replies, which is all really nice, varied content. They haven't just got just like links to other posts, which is something that a lot of companies that I see do, is that they post stuff on maybe their Facebook page and they just copy the link and then they tweet that link out on Twitter. It just, for one, it looks kind of ugly, and also people, you're jumping people around between different social networks here. You should be reformatting the content as well as you can for each social network where it is, because it really does make a difference. And then, like I mentioned, they're engaged in a lot of arguments and also beat with like rival brands as well. It's not just with their customers. They also do it with other brands, which I'll show you in a second, which is relevant. It happens a lot in like the music world. So to see actual brands doing it seems crazy, but it's super funny, and their audience relates with it as well. So here's a couple of examples from Wendy's. So their description, or their like bio, says, we like our tweets the same way we like to make our hamburgers better than anyone expects from a fast food joint, which is kind of funny because it's exactly what it is. And they're just putting a joke in there that it could just say, Wendy's, we make hamburgers, or even the company slogan. But actually they know that their tweets are good, and they can see it because they're getting the reactions. This one on the right, you might not be able to tell what that actually is. It's basically a load of memes. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the term deep fried meme. Anyone know what that is? It's basically when you get a meme and you run it through like a whole load of Photoshop filters and effects until you can't even see what it is. For some reason that is a thing. There's a whole subreddit on it. It's called deep frying memes, and yeah, I know it makes no sense, but for some reason people like it. And so yeah, there you go. The votes are in. Frosty won. We went ahead and deep fried all of them. I don't know. Here's another example of where they're actually arguing with a brand. So Wendy's repeatedly calls out McDonald's. So McDonald's tweeted this, saying Black Friday, need copy and link. So someone messed up their social media job. And Wendy's went straight for when the tweet says broken his ice cream machine, because everyone knows that the ice cream machine is always broken at McDonald's. So that's quite funny. And then someone also, so I don't know when, so this was November 24th, 2017. I don't know if you can see the stats back there, but this one got 750,000 likes and 282,000 people were talking about it. And then hey.
So did that person retweet McDonald's then? So
yes.
How did they create the linkage?
Yes, sorry. So basically, Twitter, as well as replying and retweeting, they also have another feature called quote retweet, which is basically it keeps the original tweet in there, which the person can link through. The original tweeter gets, so here, McDonald's would have been notified that Wendy's actually replied to them or quoted their tweet. But if I went onto this tweet, I could see Wendy's, and I could also click through into McDonald's one. But if I was Wendy's, all of my followers would see that. McDonald's followers wouldn't see it unless McDonald's then responded to it.
Does that post still stay up even if they take down that?
It gets a bit broken. Normally it shows like a link here and then like a dot, like a little ellipsis, and if you click on it, it says this tweet's been deleted.
Oh, okay.
Like that, which
So the trick is to get McDonald's to reply.
Yeah, just go from McDonald's, easy target. And so then they said another one, this was like a month later, someone said, can you find me the nearest McDonald's? And they just put a picture of a traffic cam. So this one got less, this got 23,000 likes. It's still pretty good for tweeting just a picture of a bin. And so that's most of my like social media part. So I'm just gonna like in this like talk, I'm gonna get quite heavy into Instagram now, and design as well. So what I mentioned like at the start, I think there's a really, really strong link between design and social media or marketing. And I think actually spending the time to, if you're a marketing team, if you've got designers that you've got access to, really utilising them is amazing. It really does make a difference. But if you can't, I'm going to show you some ways a bit later on if you haven't got access to designers who can still have some good stuff. So this is the little snippet from Instagram that I showed earlier, but I just want to focus on the fact that Instagram is really stylized, filtered, and edited. That's basically what people expect to go when they go and look at Instagram. Obviously not everyone's Instagram feed is like that, but for the most part, the brands and the celebrities that are doing really, really, really good stuff, they spend a lot of time on it, and you can tell. It's very easy to see. And all of these things play into this kind of like aspirational idea of Instagram, and the fact that when you go onto Instagram, people want to see nice looking things, or they want to see things that they want. And there's a couple of examples in a second that will show you who are doing it amazing. So these are just a few like key points to consider for your brand's Instagram profile. I think just things like high resolution photos. So mobile phones now are so good that you don't need like a DSLR camera or like a pro photographer to take it. If you've got access to one, that's amazing because it does make a difference. But you can take good photos on most smartphones nowadays, especially the new ones. We've got things like portrait mode and things like that, which makes it really good. A consistent style or like kind of theme is also really, really good. And you might have seen it. I don't know if you followed certain celebrities or brands. You'll go on there and there'll be like a main like kind of core color that they use. Maybe they all use like pinks, or maybe it's all very like washed out. Having like a consistent theme that goes all the way through is something that a lot of companies have been using. But there's different ways of doing this kind of theme rather than just color, which we'll show you. Another one is making a good first impression, and this isn't just for Instagram, this should be literally everywhere. So actually taking the time to make sure that your profile picture is the same for all of them. Maybe it's just your logo, and making sure that it's visible and it's big. Some social networks like Facebook, for example, maybe the picture is square, but on Instagram it might be circular, so making sure that the logo is not cropped. It's just little things like that actually add up to that whole kind of it's just giving kind of like this professionalism feeling, I guess. Actually properly writing the bio as well. You saw Wendy's, they just had like a single joke in there, but it was pretty funny. There's some other brands that do it as well really nicely. And I'll show you an example of Revolut do in a second. Having the correct links on there, maybe using the links in your social media for a specific purpose. Some of them use it as like a call to action, so if you've got an app to download, maybe you can send them there. If you've got, so actually on my Instagram profile I had a link to this event, rather than where as normally it's my website. Actually you can change the link to wherever you want. But like quite an important point is that on Instagram and Twitter you only have a single link on your profile that you can use. There's services like there's one called Linktree, I don't know if anyone's used that though, that basically lets you have one main link, so like linktree.whatever /James, and then I could have 10 links in there if I wanted to. There's a way to get around it, but having one link is definitely like the easiest way. Highlights, this is things like Instagram story highlights. So for anyone who's used Instagram stories before, they added a feature called Story Highlights, where basically you can go back through the archive of all the stories that you made and that you published, and then you can save them to your profile. So when people go on there, there'll be a little circle in like a new section that says Highlights, and you can name it, you can give it like a cover photo, so you can give it like an icon. On mine I've got like a music one, I've got like Spotify icon and all this kind of stuff. And that's a good way to basically break down all the different stuff that you've done day to day for either your personal brand or for your startup, and start grouping it together. So if you've got, if you put loads of events on, having one that's events and having pictures and videos and stuff from different events is really good. And it's also a nice way for people to go onto your profile and then look at what you've been doing previously. Last thing people want to do is go onto a profile and see that it hasn't posted anything in like 6 months and they haven't been active. Because why would they bother following it? And you should also, as best as you can, be consistent with your brand elsewhere as well. If you're using similar colours, so like for example YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn let you have like a cover photo at the top, making sure that's consistent, it all looks the same, so when people go onto your profile they know straight away that it's the same company, and it's not just someone trying to imitate you. I know you have on Twitter and things like that, they have like verified badges, but for most of us they're kind of out of reach unless you're Google or someone like that. And then, like I mentioned with the like native features as well, really make use of these things. So like I mentioned, the DM button on Twitter, or the Twitter threads, or the quote tweets on Twitter. On Instagram you then have polls, and you've got some other options. I'll show you as well those later on. But actually really making use of these, so it makes your content more interactive, makes it more fun to deal with, and people actually like looking at it and playing with it as well. And then the last one, which is one that I think is probably more important than some of these, depending on your context. So everyone knows Coca-Cola and Nike. Both of those companies are massive, but they market almost solely just on the feeling. Nike have this like feeling of being like an amazing athlete and like kind of conquering what you're doing, even if you've got disadvantages and things like this. Whereas Coca-Cola is all about like sharing with friends, and they always show not just the product in a bottle by itself on the table, but they always show people sharing it with each other, having fun. And if you can actually use social media to get this feeling across, maybe you need to work on what the feeling is for your brand. And I think that normally comes together from things like your brand values, or your team, or who your customers are as well. And if you can put all those together and actually work out what your feeling is, it will give you a really nice kind of like base, along with this other stuff, to start putting a social media plan together, and kind of making people feel that feeling. It's the same thing that people get when you go onto like food Instagram pages and you look at the food and you're like, oh, that looks really tasty. It's the same thing. You want to start generating a feeling rather than people just looking at your bottle of water and being like, I see that's water, what am I going to do with it? So another really good example of a company that does social media amazing on Instagram is Taco Bell. I don't know why they all seem to be US food brands, but Taco Bell is just fast food, and it's not particularly expensive, but for some reason they've really put a lot of investment into actually nailing their social media. And so I'll kind of like go through some of the bits I mentioned earlier. So around theming, whereas I mentioned before that you can have like a consistent color theme, they're doing it in a slightly different way, where you've got basically a 3-3-3 block. So Instagram, as you can see, shows your pictures in a grid, unless you press this button here, in which case it's like one by one. But by default, it's all in rows of threes. And so Taco Bell has basically decided to show off each of those threes by having a different subject or a different style. So those top three, these ones here in the middle, is at the top, it's 3 different products, but they're all illustration styles. And then the second 3 is they're all sources, and they're all being held by people in their hands, but they're in different locations. Then it's drinks, and they're all very similar drinks, but they've got different backgrounds, and they're all the same style. And you can see that actually by grouping them together in this way, and making use of the fact that Instagram has a grid rather than just a long single feed, is a really nice way of showing it. It's a really nice way of breaking down your products or your services, but still actually being able to keep that theme while not being kind of constrained to a single style. Taco Bell stuff is almost always product related. They don't really have any company stuff on there. There's no like company events. Hey, sorry.
Sorry, one question in regards to the grids. Are they post in threes?
I don't know actually. It's a good question. They probably do. I imagine they do. If you don't, then you kind of like get disjoint. If you do like one, then you get the pictures get moved around until you've posted all 3, and then they kind of like line up, if that makes sense. So I imagine they do it in threes. You can get apps that basically let you, and I'll show you these because these are in the presentation as well, but basically lets you plan out your feed to see how it looks. But yeah, I imagine they do it in threes. So another thing that they do really good is kind of like showing like the fun around the brand and like the food, and a lot of it is like bright colours, or they've got showing it in like illustration, or they're showing it in a very like stylized way that is super different to most other places. A lot of I'm sure everyone's seen like BuzzFeed's tasting videos where the food is shot from above. That's really nice, and it looks really good, and that's still like a really popular style. But as you can see from these top 3 on Taco Bell's, and then the bottom ones in the middle, they've done some other versions where they've got like a really bright colour as a background, but then they've gone for these kind of like 45-degree angle shots, which again is really, really interesting way of showing the food. This one also is kind of like worth like a special mention, where they wanted to show some kind of like crisps or like Doritos that they've got. Rather than just showing the bag or the bag on a table, they've got the bag sitting on like a bed of the crisps themselves. it's not like a big thing, but it's a nice different way of showing it than just like the standard putting it on a table. As you can see here, they've also got they've got their story highlights on there. They've got like a blog one, I think that says wallpapers, taco shop, things like that. And then they've also got this button here that if you can see my mouse moving in the middle. It's here it says directions, which I imagine would give you directions to your nearest Taco Bell, which is quite useful. They've also got a link up here to what is probably just their website. And there's different ways of using that rather than just sending people to your website. So another example that I was thinking of was Monzo. And so the reason I looked at Monzo is because it's very easy to say for Taco Bell to have a nice feed, because food is very visual and it's something that people look at, people like spending time making it look nice, and everyone knows that Instagram was pretty much originally used for just taking pictures of your food. So I wanted to see if it was really like possible for brands working in a very non-visual kind of like place to still be doing it really well. And so I started with Monzo. I've been using Monzo for a while, but I've never actually followed them until yesterday on social media. And so their whole like thing, for anyone who doesn't know, Monzo's like a challenger bank kind of thing. They've got like an app-based current account, but it's just banking and finance, which is can it really be that visual? Probably really not that I would have imagined. And as you can see here, they've got no like truly consistent thing. It looks like on this page actually, it looks like they're starting to put one together because they've got all these pictures on this side are dark, the ones in the middle are app screenshots, and these ones are still a bit over the place. And this one is just me scrolling the page, and you can see that's kind of like, it's kind of everywhere. So they haven't got like a truly consistent theme. What they have done though is in their description they put building a bank one picture at a time, which is quite nice because they are building a bank, but on Instagram it's all pictures, so it's kind of like relevant to their audience there. But something that they did do that was a bit weird is rather than having just a link to their website, which was probably just monzo.com, they've used a bit.ly link. And for anyone who doesn't know bit.ly, it's basically like a link shortener. So you can have like a really long URL for say this event. I could put it onto bit.ly and it basically gives bit.ly/125 or something like that, or ABC. And it basically gives you a shorter link that you can then use to track people going through it. So if 100 people click on that link, I can see who's clicked on it, where they've clicked on, things like that, which is really good. That's really, really good information. And I would totally recommend using them. But in this context, the link just looks a bit kind of like shady. Like, I'm sure Monzo wouldn't send you anywhere weird, but you can't see where the link's going. At least if it says monzo.com, you know you're going to their website. So it's another thing. It's like, should you, or can you think about ways to kind of like reduce any bad feelings or kind of like indecision from your users? Maybe someone's had a bad experience in the past where they've clicked on a random link and got a virus or something like that. So maybe they'd be thinking about that again. But they've also got an email button where the other one had directions. They've got an email button so you can email straight to their customer support team, which is quite good. And they've also got a really nice consistent story highlight theme. So that's quite good. So that was when I looked at Monzo. Then I was looking to see, is there anyone else who's doing a similar thing in the same area, and anyone who knows their competitor Revolut. So Revolut do almost exactly the same thing. It's an app-based current account, still in banking and finance, and I wanted to see how they handled it as well, if it would be the same. And although I think Monzo do a pretty good job, and they definitely do a better job than like HSBC or companies like this who are not interacting almost at all with like a younger audience, Revolut are doing it way better than Monzo. And so if you can see on here, their whole kind of like theme isn't color-based, or it's not 3 pictures on 3 pictures on 3 pictures. They've gone for like travel, which immediately you might be like, what does travel have to do with the bank? But maybe their whole thing is around saving money, which you can then put towards traveling or going on holiday, which is a perfect use of Instagram as that kind of like aspirational product. And so if you can tap into what people want to do or what they want to achieve or what their end goal is by using your product or service, that might be a really nice way to go, especially if you're working in an area that's less visual than other ones. So they've actually got like a mix here of you can see mostly in like the bottom right corner of the picture on the right, there's like a few people holding their Revolut card up. Their pictures are kind of split between people holding their Revolut card and just pictures of like travel. They also have in their description a little bit that says, send us your best Revolut card pictures with hashtag Revolut. So they obviously are happy for people to take pictures and share it with them, and they'll repost it, which again is a really nice way of almost getting people to be brand ambassadors. If you can get people to start posting content of their own free will about your business, then it's essentially free marketing. And if so Revolut's got 29,700 followers. If someone posts a picture who's got like maybe 10 followers, and then maybe they get 1 like per picture normally, but then suddenly Revolut post their picture, tag them in it, and they get 300 likes on their picture on Revolut's page. That would be nice for them to see, but they also might get a benefit from that. They might get some more followers, they might get some more likes on their page, and things like that. So you are still going to be probably benefiting these people, especially if you tag them in there. So that's a really good way of using social media and using kind of like user-generated content. But the number one thing that they do that I would kind of draw attention to is this kind of like aspirational end goal feeling. Hey, question?
So if I tag Revolut or HSBC or something, will my feed trickle down somehow to them, to their feeds?
What do you mean, sorry?
If I tag one of the brands, major ones, will I somehow trickle into their feeds like any of my posts?
So if you tag them as like to their account, they'll be notified that they've been tagged in your picture, and other people will be able to see that you've tagged them as well. So if I tap on your photo, I can see you've tagged Revolut in there.
Yeah, but if you tap on my photo and you're my friend, but if you're Revolut's friend, will you be able to see my picture that I put on my feed?
Yeah, they will, but
I tag Revolut?
But not they. So your picture won't show up in their feed by default. They'll have to go either onto Revolut's picture they've reposted, or through onto your profile and then see it there. They won't be following you.
Okay, but it won't show on Revolut's feed.
Not unless they repost it, but the repost is.
Actually, sorry, they would, because you would. That's the third. So you see the grid or the sequential, and the third one is wherever they've been tagged. So
Yes,
if
sorry,
I'm
yeah,
Revolut,
you're right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so this icon here, this one, this is like tags essentially. So if you go on here, you can see photos of that person. Even works with brands as well. You can also remove them. So if someone tags you in a picture and you don't want to be on there, you can actually remove it. There'd probably be no reason for them to untag themselves, unless you posted a picture and was like, I hate Revolut sucks, something like that. Then they might want to remove it. But for the most part, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Instagram doesn't exactly support reposting.
No, it doesn't. So it's pretty much like.
So if one of your followers posts a holiday photo with a Revolut card, you'd have to.
You still have to like take a screenshot of it or something like that. You can actually, if you really want to get like the good quality photo, like the full HD one, because if you take a screenshot, it's going to be like a lower res one. If you go onto the website version, you can do like, if you right click and then go to inspect element, you can actually go in and get the full size photo up. But it's a bit long-winded. But there is a website that does it as well. I forget what the link is exactly. Maybe I'll find it and email it to you guys. And basically you can put in the link of an Instagram photo and then it downloads the original high-res version for you, which you then can repost. So that's Revolut. So they're both doing like a pretty good job, but Revolut are doing it in a slightly different way, which is a bit more relevant to Instagram. So now I'm just going to talk about a few apps and tools that you guys can use to get started on this stuff, and which these are all ones that I've used. I think they're all awesome. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with photography or has got like a background in photography, but for the most part, if you are shooting in if you're shooting in RAW, so RAW is like another style of shooting than just shooting in like to JPEG or PNG file types. I'm by no means an expert in photography at all, but it basically gives you a bit more control around editing. You can edit the colours a bit more selectively and things like that. And so if you've got the opportunity to shoot in RAW, most DSLR cameras actually, if you take a picture, you've got the option for it to save both at the same time. But on mobile phones, for the most part, it doesn't shoot in RAW. These apps are all iPhone as well. Sorry, I'm fully aware that people probably need it for Android as well. I only have iPhone so I can't speak to them. But I think some of them are cross-platform, especially Lightroom. I know that one is for sure. And so what I was saying about raw photos, this app here, Halide, is actually a really nice camera app. It lets you shoot photos in RAW as well, and it gives you a lot more control over things like depth control or creating like depth maps for doing like portrait mode kind of shots, which gives you like a really nice blurry background and then like your subject in focus. It's really, really good, and they've actually got like a partnership now with this app Darkroom, the second one, which is for editing, and you can honestly get some really, really nice effects. They've got like a whole load of filters, a bit like VSCO camera, if anyone remembers that. I think it's still really used. But it's basically the same thing. You can add a load of filters on, you can like edit the colours, you can crop it, and add like borders and things like that. It's just a good way of basically theming all your pictures in the same ways. You can copy and paste effects between pictures as well. So if I edit one in a certain style and a certain like colorway, and I take another picture, I can copy those edits and put them on the second one, which then starts letting me build up this kind of consistent color thing that I mentioned earlier. Lightroom is by Adobe. It's part of their like creative suite things. I think the app is actually free. I don't think you have to have like a subscription to be able to use it. And Lightroom and Darkroom aren't related at all, even though the names are very similar, but they do like the same job anyway. Lightroom is really good, and actually a lot of like professional photographers use not only use Lightroom but also make their presets available. So if you see like some photographers with really, really nice or nicely colored like feeds or photos, quite often they make their like Lightroom presets available that you can then apply onto your pictures, which is really nice. So if you see like a style that you like, and it's like a professional photographer, normally they sell them for like $5 or something, but you can get them for free. And the last one is Snapseed. This one's by Google. It's pretty good. It gives you some like really nice effects. On Snapseed, you can actually do quite a cool thing where I think it uses machine learning. But if you have a picture, say it's like kind of like this much of me, and I wanted to extend the height more, I can just literally just drag the picture up, and it will keep my head height here, but it will just it will kind of like imagine what the space above me looks. So if your photos are very like cropped in, you can actually extend it out. I don't know how it does it, but it's pretty cool. And then this one here is retouching. So pretty much every celebrity and people like that, and pretty much everyone on Instagram retouches their photos. Pixelmator is it's also available on Mac. I don't know if it's available on Windows or not, but it's on iPhone, iPad, things like that. And it's probably got the best tool for cutting stuff out of a picture. So if you see, I took a picture I really liked once of like a house, and there was like a load of pylons in the background, and I just literally just like draw over them with my finger, and then they take them straight out. It's really, really good. Honestly, it's if you're looking to do any of that kind of stuff, Pixelmator is definitely the way to go. And then Airbrush is really good more for like face stuff, like if you've got like bags under your eyes, like I did, and you can just like cut them out straight away. It's also got like teeth whitening, which is quite nice. I think Halide potentially you have to pay for. I think Darkroom maybe you have to pay. It's about £5 probably. I think all the rest of them are free though. Maybe Pixelmator you have to pay for. And then these two are like planning ones. So UNUM, this is the one that I mentioned earlier about planning the feed out, how it's going to look. So if you have a load of pictures on your camera roll, basically you connect it to your Instagram account, it shows you your feed, and then you can drop pictures in and kind of like move them around, like drag them to see like how they're going to be laid out. So if you're starting to do stuff like Taco Bell do, where they have these like 3 on 3 on 3, you can start like stacking your pictures up and see how it's going to look ahead of time, which just lets you plan it out. It's quite good. Some of my friends use it for matching colours as well. So if they've got like a bunch of like red photos, maybe they'll go way back in their camera and find like other ones that have like a similar colour and put them all together, stuff like that, which is quite nice. And then this last one, Jetpack, is really good for hashtag management. So especially on Instagram, if you're looking to like start growing your profile, you should be using all the hashtags available. So you've got 30 that you can use per picture. Quite often companies use like 5. It makes no sense not to just use all of them. And I know they look kind of ugly in the description, but you can actually, so Jetpack does it as well, but you can do it manually by basically if you put 5 like bullet points, if you go into your keyboard and you choose like the bullet point, if you do like 5 on different lines and then your hashtags, then it basically collapses all of them behind some little brackets. I don't know why, but it basically hides them. So you still get the benefits of it showing up in different feeds, but without it looking super ugly. The thing about it showing up in feeds that I mentioned is like, so if you take a picture and you hashtag it as like startup, then for anyone else who searches directly for the hashtag startup, your picture will show up in their feed. People can follow hashtags now, which is like a fairly new feature. So if I wanted to follow the hashtag startup, I'll start seeing pictures from people even though I don't follow them. But if they tag their picture with startup, then it will show up in my feed as well. So that is another good reason to start using as many hashtags as you can, and relevant ones is really like the most important thing. Like, you should be using relevant hashtags to whatever the picture is or whatever your business is. And there's also some really good websites. I'll try and send these over to you as well after it's going to put them in here. Basically, you can type in like keywords related to what you're working on, like science or whatever, and it will give you a whole load of like really high-ranking hashtags that are also super relevant. Some of them get very like overrun, and there's just so many people who are like posting photos in there that your photo will almost never be seen. So for example, if I went on to Instagram and I did like hashtag selfie, there's probably 1 million people posting hashtag selfie today. So it's very unlikely it'll be seen. So it's definitely worth considering, like with your hashtags, have some like really high-ranking ones, and it actually shows you how many people are posting photos with each hashtag as well. So some of them, if you can look for between like maybe 10,000 to like 100,000 people posting, and then a few that are like millions of people, you've got 30 to pay for, and that's quite a lot. So I don't think you have any trouble. But basically, what Jetpack lets you do is have a whole load of series of hashtags in like a certain area. So I have ones for startup, and I have loads of related words. I can literally just go onto this app, tap it, it copies it to my clipboard, and I can go straight into Instagram and paste it. If you paste your, it gives you that option that I mentioned to like put the bullet points in as well, so you don't have to type that. But if you paste that comment into the first comment on your picture rather than the description, that's how it gets collapsed. So rather than typing your description out and then pasting it at the bottom, like people like generally did since like Instagram started, if you post the picture, wait for it to be like published, and then immediately go into your comments and post the comments photo, sorry, the hashtags comment in there, then it'll get collapsed, and it will kind of like stop taking space.
Does that only work if you do that immediately?
It doesn't. You can do it anytime, but to get the most benefit of it, you kind of probably want to do it immediately. It makes less of a difference now that Instagram doesn't have like a I don't know, like a chronological feed. Now that the feed's kind of like all over the place, your photo might show up in front of someone in like 3 days' time at the top of their feed, or it might be there straight away. But to get like the most effects out of actually like since you put it up, it's probably worth doing immediately. You don't have to be like 1 minute or something. So yeah, these are like the main apps. These are like the ones that I use like almost day to day. They're pretty good. I can definitely vouch for these ones. And so I've got like a few blogs and some like websites to show you as well. So for anyone who doesn't know Buffer, they've been around for a while now. They're quite famous, and they started off as basically being a platform to let you schedule your posts. And so initially I think it was just Twitter and Facebook, but then they added, I think, LinkedIn, and you can now do Instagram ones as well. Instagram just like in the last 6 months or so opened their like API to let people or other websites access it. So now you can start scheduling posts to Instagram as well, which if you've got 1,800 pieces of content to post, if you can take some of the work out of posting it, then makes sense, right? So Buffer's really good as a tool, but their blog is also amazing. It's so good. They've got so many good pieces of information. I think they've also got like a video series. I think they only do the videos on Twitter though, but they've got their like team, the founder and stuff. Regularly does like videos about stuff. Hey.
What's the difference between Buffer, Later, and Hootsuite? That's what I think.
They all pretty much do the same thing. It's just like personal preference. They all do like very similar stuff.
Are these two subscription based?
I know Later is. I'm not sure about Buffer. I think Buffer is as well.
Buffer is.
Is it? Yeah, perfect. And then Hootsuite, I'm pretty sure that is as well. I'm not sure.
You get a free trial.
Oh yeah. And so yeah, I mean, by all means, like try the free trial of all of them. I think there's done like a few weeks or something. But yeah, Buffer is a really good tool. Their blog is really good. They do some good videos, and they're also like a really cool company who publish all of their like stats fully transparent, so you can see like how many users they're growing and this kind of stuff. If you're interested in that kind of stuff. Later is also really good. They're much more Instagram focused. I think they might even be only Instagram focused. The name actually used to literally be Latergram and then later for Instagram. But they've got some like really nice things where you can basically like search for other posts to repost on Instagram and things like that. So they actually give you some help with reposting. And you can search by like keywords, find like influencers and things like that. It's quite good. But their blog is really like the main thing that I use it for. Okay.
Like with data, like you, they will alert you when you schedule your post, and then you post it. Like
is it? I know it used to be. I don't know if it changed though, because I know some of the websites now post it for you now that Instagram gave access. I don't know. It could well be like that because I know it definitely used to be. I'd be surprised if they hadn't changed it to let it auto post for you. But it might be, yeah. Yeah, for anyone who didn't hear that, some of the tools actually auto-post for you, or on some social networks, so like Twitter and Facebook can be auto-posted because of the like API access that they give them. Instagram, because they didn't let you do that before, you could basically plan your post, but because it can auto-post it for you, it would prompt you, it would say like at the time, if you say we're going to post it at 7 PM on Saturday, it would say at 7 PM on Saturday, it will give you a notification that says post your picture, and you basically could open the app, copy the picture or copy the hashtag or description, and then go into Instagram and paste it. Now, I know some of the tools, I'm pretty sure Buffer lets you auto post. I'm not sure about later, good point. Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, if you've got access to designers, or if you've got some like design skills yourself, then it's definitely worth like taking the time to make your posts a bit nicer. And if you haven't, on the other hand, these are two really good tools for it. So Pablo is one that's owned by Buffer. Both of these basically do the same thing. And I'll show you what they look like. I'll show you a picture. And so here we go. So this is kind of what Pablo looks like. So you've got these pictures over here are by, I think, Unsplash, which are basically they're available to use. They're like copyright-free images. You're allowed to use them on your products to like sell things like that. You can just search whatever you want. It says they've got 600,000 images, so it's really something that's like relevant. And you can basically choose, as you can see over here, you can choose different sizes. So if you want to make a post for Twitter and Facebook, it gives you the perfect dimensions for that. If you want to do one for Pinterest, which is essentially the same for like Instagram or Snapchat, it's got those as well. And there's one as well for Instagram, which is square. And they've got like some filters, some tools for cropping, adding text and quotes and things like that. So if you haven't got access to a designer, or you haven't got any experience in design, that might be a really good way to actually save yourself a bit of hassle and still turn out with something that looks really, really nice. They've also got some templates as well at the top. I don't know what they look like there. So I'll take a picture. The other one that I mentioned, Canva, does basically the same thing. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is Canva. They've got a lot more kind of like stylized and like designy templates. So for example, over here I searched for food, and it came up with a whole load of different specific ones, National Hamburger Day, etc. So you can actually get really specific on here, and this is a nice way to actually do a lot of like really different stuff. They've got tons of options here. They've got templates, elements that you can add, text, background, colours, etc. You can upload your own pictures to it, of course. And they've also got this like section on the bottom right that says apps, which is basically some like weird like integration things that lets you turn your picture into a GIF, or turn a video into a GIF, or just make it a bit more interesting. They're not all GIF related, but some of them are. So yeah, that's another good option. Canva's pretty popular. Again, I'm not entirely sure if you have to pay for these. I know you don't have to pay for Pablo. It's like a free tool that Buffer let you use. I managed to get onto Canva here to take the screenshot without paying, so I assume it's fine, but maybe you have to pay.
Canva is free.
Is it?
Yeah, it's good. The
Like
app's
the
really good on the
32
iPhone. Yeah.
Oh really? Okay,
There's
cool.
some templates you have to pay for, but the
Yeah.
majority are free.
Oh, okay, that's pretty good. Enough to get started anyway then. And then you can literally just download these pictures to post later. So here are some examples of different tools that you can use. So this is specifically on Instagram. And so one of the really kind of interesting things that I mentioned that Wendy's do is making their content kind of like more interesting or more engaging. And one of the ways of doing that is through actually utilising the kind of like native tools that these platforms give you access to. So, for example, if you were going to post something and you wanted to make sure it was on brand, if you post like text or if you want to do a drawing like this, Instagram's actually got this little eyedropper tool that lets you select from your picture that you've uploaded which colour you want to use. So you can literally just drag it around and choose, I want this blue because it's my brand's colour. And that's a really super simple way of keeping your stuff on brand, which will keep your marketing like this. You've got tools like drawing. I drew this little like smiley face. They've got some which are like an eraser or highlighter, stuff like that, which is also helpful. But they've also got the ability to add GIFs as well. These GIFs are taken straight from Giphy, and you can add them. They will like move, and it's a nicer way of just like bringing a bit of kind of like interesting content into your stories, especially if you start doing things like making jokes and things like that. They've also got these other options here. So Instagram stories are really good for tagging. You can tag people, you can tag hashtags in them. People can search those straight from within your story. I did hashtag Huckletree up here. I could also tag Huckletree if I really wanted to. And then anyone looking at my story can go straight through to Huckletree's page. They've also got this like polling feature here, which I wrote, are you having a nice time? You can, by default it says yes or no, but then you can actually change and put whatever you want on the buttons. It only gives you 50-50 though, so it kind of has to be a one or the other option for that. And then they've also got like an ask question thing, so as well as this like poll, you can actually put in this little box where you can drag around, choose the colour, you can change it all, and actually ask like real questions that you want an input on, and then people can reply straight into that. They can write like a whole long message and it goes straight into your DMs, so you can see it later. One like good example of using the poll feature is, so I did this one. I said which should I use as my first slide, and I just did an up and a down emoji and let people choose which one they preferred. Stuff like that could be really good if used properly for like product launches or new designs, things like that. There's a lot of really interesting ways that you can use these kind of like native features. Some of it's just like a bit of like out of the box thinking. So another like bonus design tool, if you want to get like a bit more into it, obviously I'm kind of like biased as a designer, so I try and like go in and use like the full thing. But this design tool called Figma is awesome. There is like a paid plan, but I think it's free up to like 5 users or something like that, or until you need like a company account. But it basically gives you the same as what like Photoshop, or maybe not so much Photoshop, which is more like photo editing, but especially Illustrator or Sketch. I don't know if anyone's heard of Sketch as well. These tools are like primarily designed for user interface design, web design, app design, things like that. But Sketch, for example, is Mac only, and the Adobe ones have like a subscription. This one is not only essentially cross-platform, but it's also free up to like a certain level, which is good. And you can use all the features while it's free. It's also browser-based, which sounds like it should be horrible to use, but it's actually surprisingly good. I've had pretty much no lag. They've got like a desktop app that you can download, but even the browser version is pretty good. It's surprisingly effective, and also it's all the data is stored in the cloud. So if you want to access it from another computer, you can do that as well, which is good. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure they're about to bring a tablet version out. I don't know if anyone watched, Google did a like a big event the other day, and they had like a picture of a tablet on the screen, and one of the icons on there was Figma. I just noticed it. I didn't see if they didn't announce anything, but maybe that'd be quite cool. Then as you can see, like on the right over here, they've got this like concept of frames, which is almost like your kind of artboard, I guess, to work with. And they've got a whole load of presets for like phone design or tablet design, web design, etc. They've also got a load of these like frames for social media, so you can do Twitter posts or headers or some things like that. And it just gives you the perfect dimension, so that your picture's not going to get cropped or cut off when you put it on social media, which just makes like a little bit of a difference, which is quite nice. And it just kind of adds this like kind of like professionalism kind of idea. This is how Figma looks. So I actually designed most of these slides on Figma. I did it on Figma in Keynote, and it looks very kind of like similar to if you've used like Illustrator or Sketch. It's pretty much the same interface, but it's really good. I totally recommend having a look at it. And if you even if you haven't got a design background, it might be worth just like playing around with it as well. There's loads of like courses you can do, YouTube tutorials and things like that as well. if anyone wants to know more about this, just like grab me. I can point you in the direction of some good ones. But it is really good. I like it a lot. So yeah. I believe this is the last section that I was going to talk about. But so these are some points that are really, really interesting. And they're super important as well. If you're actually undecided on what your kind of like feeling with social media should be, you should think about what your company is doing, or what your mission is, and also what your reasons for starting the company was as well. I'm sure when you started, you had like an idea of what you wanted it to be, whether that was like your goal of how it should be, or maybe it was a bad experience with like a job and teaching you like how it shouldn't be, and you want to do the opposite of that. I feel like a lot of companies, especially the companies that I see, are really kind of they embody a lot of like the same values and things of the people that started them as well. And so if you can actually talk to your team and act on based on their skills as well, and find out what your team is like. If you've got other people doing it, that is. If it's just you, then it makes it a bit easier. But if you've got other people in your team, like talk to them and find out like what are they like. Maybe they're funny people, so maybe your strategy should be making a lot of jokes and posting like memes in the company and things like that, because the team is good at it. If your team are, if you've got someone on your team, maybe you've got like a developer who uses Reddit a lot, maybe let them handle like the Reddit side of it. Maybe it's interesting to let people actually focus on the bits that they enjoy the most. Social media, it can take like a lot of time and a lot of like effort to do, but if you've got people who enjoy doing it anyway, then utilize those people. Help them like kind of be brought into the brand and your kind of like your strategy with this stuff. And if there's someone who's good at it, then let them kind of like roll with that, I guess. One thing that you can never go wrong with is education and valuable content. If you're doing stuff to help people, whether that's your customers or like just kind of like wider society, you're never going to be like going in like a bad direction. Some of the bits I mentioned earlier when I was going through generating some like ideas was a lot of the topics there were around like career. That's a really, really good place to start, because it gives you a lot of options to look at like students who are looking to get into your field and stuff like that. And even with not that much experience, there's a lot of stuff that you can still teach people who are trying to get into it. So delivering kind of like valuable or kind of educational content is a really, really nice place to start. And it might be a good way to get you started into it as well. And I think you should also give as much as possible. I think free content is amazing. It's a really nice way to kind of like get people interested and kind of like aligned with what you're doing without just hard selling them all the time. I'll come to that again in a second. But for example, if you're posting loads of content, maybe only actually mention your product or your service one out of every 10 times. There's some really good websites. I don't know what they are or what their products. I can't remember now. But basically, they post a lot of almost like checklists on Medium, the blog website. If anyone's used it, and basically they say like 10 best tools to use for social media, for example, and then maybe they are a tool for social media, but 9 out of those 10 they're recommending other people's products who are like competitors and things like that, and saying what they think are really good about those tools, but then they only recommend themselves like right at the end of the list, or they say a little bit about themselves. So they're still, it might sound counterintuitive, but actually having that kind of like authentic voice and saying that actually we're not just trying to sell to our customers, we're trying to improve their lives or their processes as well. It's a really, really effective way of doing it. And if you can say, actually maybe, even though we think that we can help you with what you're doing, maybe we're not the perfect tool for you, maybe try this other one and you'll be more successful. The chances are they're at the very least going to think about you like favourably. They might recommend you to another place, or they might actually just come back and use you later in the future. Another one is to talk to your audience like they're people rather than customers. This is a really, really important one. I used to work in customer support as well, and it's from both sides, like having like people talk to customer support people as like their animals is like, it's true, and it's frustrating when stuff goes wrong. And so a lot of the people are the same on social media as well. For people using Twitter for customer support, quite often when people were like reaching out and they're really frustrated, it's not about like you as like a company, it's more about their like individual kind of experience. And then this also goes into like sales as well. It's like rather than trying to like constantly be trying to like sell or like ram your product down their throat, just like interact with them, like have fun and make jokes without having to like send them a link to sign up all the time and things like this. Just be like very hands-off with it. I think it will give you a much better experience and kind of outcome than you expect. And this is like really the last point, and this is another super important one. It's just like have fun with social media stuff, because there's a lot of stuff to do, and there's a load of different options in there, and it can sound like it's a load of work, so you might as well try and make it as fun as possible, add GIFs in there, add random polls and stuff, interact with people, make jokes and things like that. There's a chance that some of it will be mistakes. Wendy's actually have like a good section on that post that I made earlier, that I linked to the bottom, where they say like they're fully aware that some of the stuff they're going to make is going to be a miss and people are going to get annoyed by it. But if they don't try it, then they're never going to be perceived as like a different brand. So yeah, go out and like have fun with this stuff and try lots of different things. And be prepared for some of it to not be amazing. I'm sure most of it will be. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I know you're all super busy, so I really appreciate the time. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, here they are. So I'm not entirely sure the plan is. I don't think Paul's in the room anymore. So I passed these sheets around. I was planning to like go back to the original slide that I showed, where I was going through them and let you guys kind of like work out how they are. I've got some of like the second and third sheets. I didn't know how many to print. I didn't know how many people were coming. So they're there if anyone wants. But I'll also email the slides. I'll email the sheets as well as worksheets. They'll also be available on my Twitter, etc. So if you want to access them that way, please do. And I'm also available for any questions if you have anything.
I have a question. So
yeah.
Is there an average where you recommend posting on Facebook per week or Instagram or Twitter? Is it best every day, every day?
I think if you can try and do like maybe like 2 or 3 a week is quite good. That's more than most people are going to be doing. If you really want to be on it, maybe like once every day, just so you're constantly hitting people. But you also want to be careful that you're not kind of like you're always like in their face. I think actually if you are really active and you want to post a lot of places, then start splitting it out across different platforms. And so maybe do LinkedIn and Facebook like twice a week, and Instagram 3 times a week, and stuff like this, and kind of break it up. So you might be reaching them in different areas. They're still aware of you, but you're not just always on Facebook. But I mean, it can never hurt to like start off slow and then build up actually as well, rather than trying to do 100 posts in 1 week. Thank you.
Does Facebook allow buffer to buffer, like, because cancel?
Oh really? Oh, I didn't realise that. Yeah, I mean last time I checked, buffer did. I think Facebook was the first one that they allowed. Sorry?
I thought I have a policy that they're not going to allow this.
Yeah, I think you should just create it and it shoots you up. Hey, was there a question? Yeah, hey.
For a startup company that doesn't have the product yet, either online or physical, is it good to start Instagram, Facebook pages, or is it better to wait to have a product?
I mean, I would say start as early as possible.
As early as possible?
Yeah, for sure. I think...
because you talked about the content, but you don't have the product, maybe it's a little bit with the consistency.
In that case, I would say like maybe share other relevant content. If there's stuff within your niche that you see, news stories or things like that, stuff that you think would be relevant to that customer or your audience base, totally like start early, start sharing that stuff. And if you can, you should totally have a website with like a box for people to sign up, that kind of thing, and start building an audience as soon as possible. If you can have this audience to call upon later, if you need to like make sales or reach out to them for beta tested users, things like that. If you can make that audience as soon as possible, start growing it, definitely going to benefit.
When you start with your product, you will have more audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And by that point, they already know who you are. So it's not like a cold kind of like sale. They already know who you are, so it's like a warm lead, and they'll probably feel a lot better about doing it. You can also start with educational content in that sense, and be like, because you haven't got your product there already, maybe you can actually do things to benefit people who are working in that area. Give them some content. I mean, even stuff like this, like checklists and things like that, stuff that people can just like action, and that will be information. If you're working in that niche, there's probably loads of stuff that you know that loads of people also don't. So maybe start sharing some content that you can create, if you've got the time for it, that is.
A lot of social media is quirky or funny or surprising or repostable. How much is that a requirement from a corporate post, or some branches don't lend themselves to be?
Yeah, no, for sure. No, you're absolutely right. I think at the very least, regardless of whether it's like funny or shareable, you should still like continue to like post consistently out there. Having that like content regularly going out is going to get in front of people. It's super valuable, and whether people share it or not is like an added benefit. Probably more people will share it than you think. It'll probably, if stuff is relevant to people, whether it's funny or not, they're probably still going to share it. And whether they share it actually on the platform or they just link it to someone else on email or text or something, you're still getting it out there. So even if it's not shown up as being shared on the social network, in offline senses, people still might be sharing it around. Like I shared this link to this article I mentioned about Wendy's. I didn't share it on social media at all, but I added it to my slides anyway. So that's the same stuff can happen.
Yeah. So you can be educational.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
And what do you think about reposting other people's content versus yours? I mean, now that you have like 1,800 pieces of content, maybe you don't have any more time. But
yeah, it might be that you don't need to. I think it's definitely really good. It might be that you've got enough stuff that you don't need to, but I think actually it's a really good way of getting people kind of like more invested in your brand as well, because a piece of their kind of like work essentially is out there and connected to you. It's a really nice way of like rewarding people without really having to do anything, and it could be a really nice way to start building almost like power users as well of your product. One of the best ways of turning, like with apps and stuff like that, is by creating like an ambassador program. And if you've got someone who's using it like semi-regularly, maybe it's very early stage, you've got an app, let's say, and someone's using it like regularly, if you reach out to them and say, oh, we've got this like brand ambassador kind of thing we're going to do, we want to reward our like best users and this kind of thing, you can actually start turning kind of like semi-passive users into like power users who are really bought into your values and stuff. And you can do exactly the same thing by social media, but with a lot less investment. You don't have to give them any products and stuff. Just by posting something or reposting some of their work that they might get kind of like some extra value from, it's a really, really good way to do it. But sometimes there's problems with like rights and things like that. Most of the time, I think it's kind of like fair game if someone like sends you or tags you and stuff. The kind of like feeling is that you can repost it, but it can never hurt also just to reach out by DM and be like, oh, we love your picture, can we share it?
I was going to say, I've seen like some really popular feeds that are literally just an aggregator of like, loads of other people's Instagram.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
and they get really popular doing that before they even have a product or they have a service.
I mean,
build their audience based on that.
Yeah, for sure. Like the guy at the back mentioned, if you're actually like pre-product and you haven't launched anything yet, that could be a really nice way to do it. If you've got
like a mood board almost.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's a whole Instagram page with like millions of followers just post pictures of other people's dogs and stuff like that. You can, if you've got like an engaged audience already from somewhere, maybe it's come from another place. Totally make use of it.
Yeah, sorry, another.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough followers, and then you put out like a question on your Instagram stories, you get no answers. Isn't that a bit?
Yeah, that's right. I get that as well. Happens to me too. I mean, totally. It's frustrating, but people can't see how many people have or haven't replied to your thing. Obviously, if you don't post any, then it kind of shows that no one asked. That happens to me. But a nice way to get around that is, I mean, you can obviously like fake get some friends to like reply for you, that kind of thing. Also, actually, I didn't mention this in the slides. I probably should have mentioned it. But a really nice way to get stuff started is finding people in like doing similar things. Maybe it's not like competitive products, but if you've got similar areas or people with different kind of expertise. And work with them on content as well and kind of like collaborate with people. I've got about 6 or 7 friends who are working in different businesses to mine or slightly different areas of tech. And we work together to do kind of like regular videos on YouTube. This is like an example. This is like a microphone, a little kind of like weird stand thing here, and then this like tripod at the bottom. And all of this was like maybe like £80 or something, but it gives you like quite a decent like setup. Just doing something like that, it's actually like fairly cheap to put good content together now, especially with like access to like YouTube's got like a built-in editor and things like this. If you can get people and start like collaborating with other people as well, it's a really good way, or collaborating with other businesses as well is a really good way to do it. There's a few businesses doing it. I can't think of any examples right now, but I'm sure I can send them later. Any other questions?
What other hardware would you recommend apart from the mic and the stand?
What else? I can send you links to these as well, by the way, if you want. There's also, I don't know if anyone's seen those like camera stabilizers. It's like your phone goes on the end of it. It's like almost like a selfie stick. But then if you move it around, the camera actually doesn't move and it stays super. Yeah, gimbal. Those are pretty cool. I have one of those and it's quite fun to use. A lot of this stuff is way too. It's not necessary at all for like starting off. You can literally just like hold your phone and do it. But if you have got some extra money and you want to put it into like high production value stuff, could be a good way to do it. I think that's the most important one. There's also, I don't know if I've got them with me. There's you can get some little like clip-on lenses if you're going to shoot on phones. So you can get clip-on lenses that give like a wider view or like a more like zoomed-in view, which is quite good. Or you can get little like clip-on lights that go on the phone just to light people's faces a bit better. Stuff like that. Anything else I can help with?
Are there any particular like mediums like Facebook or Instagram which you think value-wise play out a lot better than the others?
So although I mentioned that Facebook, for example, is kind of like a more like private, intimate kind of like thing, Facebook's obviously got Facebook ads, and so that also then copies across to Instagram. You can if you put Facebook ads on Facebook, you can also ask them to be shown on Instagram as well. And so Facebook and Twitter, for example, are the best ones for sending people to other places because you can do stuff like linking out within your posts and things like that. For example, if I put a URL to my website in the description of a photo on Instagram, no one can click on it. It's just a not clickable link unless they go to my profile and click the link there. Whereas on Twitter, I can put a link in my description, I can put it in my tweet, etc. And I can send people to different places. So I think probably the two I would say that are valuable for Facebook, it's probably like good for sending people to other places. Instagram is, I would say Instagram and Twitter are probably my two favourites to focus on. LinkedIn is good because you've got like a load of stuff, but it also sucks at the same time. So, any other questions?
How do you recommend building followers to your business page on LinkedIn?
Honestly, this is going to sound like such a horrible answer to give, but just posting like consistent, valuable content. If you can actually like just create good, valuable stuff to people, then it will grow. And it sucks, but it might take 6 months or so, or a year before you get like a decent following. But by that point, there will be people who are familiar with you and they're engaged. And then if you do start to like ask them to download your app or sign up for your service, things like that, they've already known about you for however long. And so it's another perfect example why if you start it today, it might take 6 months, but if you don't start it today and you start it in 6 months, then you've got another 6 months to wait. So that kind of thing. That's probably the number one thing, sadly. I mean, you can do things like Facebook ads where you actually optimize it for your page to be followed and stuff like that. Same on Instagram as well. You can even do ones on Instagram where you ask for your app to be downloaded, and they basically stick like a little install button on the Facebook ad, or sorry, Instagram ad. So you can do stuff like that. But again, you're still paying for it. Although it's a million times better than just like buying a load of like bot followers, because that really doesn't help anyone. Any other questions? Has anyone got any other questions about like the like help sheet that I gave, or has anyone like?
How contactable are you? I mean, I understand you're quite busy running YS and.
No, like I'm pretty contactable. I essentially very easy answer. Like if you message me like any time of day, I will get back to you. If you want to like reach me like really quickly, if you just DM me on Twitter or Instagram, that's like the fastest way, because I have so many emails that I just have to not look at some. Essentially, if I go back to what was I talking about? So this is like this was like the main part of like the worksheets. So like along with those bits that I said, I don't think anyone wants any of these ones, but basically I've got one which is these two grey boxes. I don't know if anyone can see. Are basically aspirational competitors. It's like people who are doing really good on social media. Yeah, sorry, there's like 3, but I don't know how many you can up. I don't think you guys will like share them. Yeah, of course you can. Let's pass them around. If there's not enough, then let me know. I'm going to email about. There's 3 different ones, so you might get like 1 or 2. Sorry, I realised. So yeah, basically one of them has like aspirational competitors. It's like people that are on social media who are doing like really, really awesome stuff. Maybe it's their like design that you like, or they do loads of jokes and things like that. Basically, they should write them down, write their account number, etc. Account, username, whatever. And then write down some bullet points of what they're doing really good. It's just like a nice reference to have. And then there's also a load of dimensions for things like posting on Twitter or Instagram stories about how the design should look. And so rather than just posting like a long portrait picture on Twitter, it will just get cropped into the middle. So if you actually like reformat it to the right size, it'll look better. And there's another page which has got like a couple of checklists. It's like one of the checklists is essentially where is it? One of the checklists is